Are you going to take it away? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Memphis Jewish Federation's Teen Professionals Council as we discuss college admissions during COVID-19. Now, my name is Bitsy Kasselberg. I'm a college readiness counselor for Reach Memphis, which is a nonprofit organization that works with high-achieving high school students in the public school system, and I'm delighted to be here. As you probably know, the council is made up of representatives from Jewish organizations that work with teenagers, and we've come together tonight to sponsor this info session on college admissions and navigating Jewish life on college campuses during COVID-19. We have a stellar group of women who are going to be doing the Q&A this evening, and I'd like to give them all an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about the organizations they represent. So without further ado, Jolie, would you like to get started?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Jolie Slovis, and I am the founder and creator of a private practice called Rhodes College. And I do this after being in the business now for 15 years. I am from New York, thus the accent. And I was the director of college guidance for a high school in New York for a long time before I went private. North Shore Hebrew Academy High School. It's a modern Orthodox yeshiva high school in Great Neck, New York. And I met a man in Memphis, moved here. So I have a private practice now, and I've at 10 years in the making. And primarily it's geared towards helping all students through the college application process. I work one-on-one with students, and I have a website, pondercollege.com, that is geared towards parents with a tremendous amount of resources and blog posts, free resources to help parents help their kids. So that really is my biggest passion, is really empowering parents to learn about the process and then help their kids so that they don't necessarily have to hire a private counselor like myself. But I do work also one-to-one with kids, and I've been doing this for a long time, and it's a thrill. I absolutely love what I do. So being here is an honor, and I really appreciate you inviting me.
Allie?
Hi, all. I'm Allie Hamilton. I am an associate director at Rhodes College in the admission office. And I specifically work with undergrads as they're thinking about applying to Rhodes, but I also have a partnership with the Jewish community partners here in Memphis, as we have a fellowship for students who are interested in Jewish life at Rhodes and leadership there. So I manage that partnership and that selection process. So thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Okay. Sophie, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Sophie Bloch. I'm the director of Hillels of Memphis, which serves Rhodes College, University of Memphis, and our other amazing academic institutions here. I'm originally from San Diego and worked for Hillel at UC San Diego for 4 years before I made the move east and south. So I've been here for a year and a half, working for Hillel here, which is a program of the Memphis Jewish Federation and well connected and well supported by the Memphis Jewish community. But I've been in the world of Jewish higher education nonprofit work for almost 6 years now. So I'm excited to weigh in on the conversation.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I've got the easy job tonight. I'm just supposed to be guiding the conversation through a series of questions that we're going to be asking to our panelists. And let me tell you, we're going to have a Q&A at the end, so you can either feel free to ask your questions then or post them in the chat room, and we'll bring those up at the end of the conversation. All right? So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And Jolie, you're the first one up on my script. So tell us, how has college admissions changed since COVID from the perspective of the applicant?
So from the perspective of the applicant, I think it's really important to note that pre-COVID, it is truly a time for these kids and families that's incredibly unpredictable. We apply to 10 to 12 schools for a reason, because we really can never truly judge, and Allie will probably speak to this, exactly what a college is looking for at that particular moment in time, and what a good fit actually means. Is this school a good fit for me, and will they want me, and will I want them? So before COVID, it was an incredibly unpredictable experience. Now it's a completely unprecedented, unpredictable time because all the patterns have changed, all the data is changing, the requirements are changing, and quite frankly, the world is somewhat chaotic. So it all layers on top of a process, I think, that is already infused with a tremendous amount of anxiety as it is. And my job, and I tell parents and kids all the time, is to try to make this fun for them. They're planning the next 4 years of their life. That's an amazing, amazing thing to be able to do, and providing them with the resources and the research to be able to do that. And I think the hardest part for an applicant, and quite frankly for myself, are the lack of answers right now. And financial questions, questions about online learning, questions about applying without tests. I mean, that's a huge piece. There's already a lot of test optional schools out there, but now almost every school is test optional. So do I send in tests? Do I take a test? What if I can't take a test? There's just a tremendous amount of therapy that's going on in my work with my kids because there's just so many unknowns. And I think that that's just a small microcosm of everything that's going around with all of us anyway. So these students deserve, the ones applying this year, a tremendous amount of compassion and empathy for having the courage to go through this process right now when I think that there's so many unknowns. So I truly appreciate their efforts, and they definitely, definitely need extra resources now.
Great answer, great response.
Do you agree, Bitsy?
Yeah, I really do. In fact, one of the things, like I was thinking as you were saying that, is we have our students apply to schools that are fairly close to home as well, because you never know when they might decide to change. And I know we have 2 or 3 students among the 50 or 75 that graduated last year in our program who have been accepted to some pretty good schools in other parts of the country. And with everything that's going on with COVID and the Black Lives Matter situation, just all the upheaval that was going on in the world, they decided to stay closer to home. And they actually ended up, staying within like about a 3 or 4 hour driving range from the Memphis area, just because they wanted that security. And their parents, it was their decision too, which is interesting too, not the parents. So I think it's just a difficult time in general. If the anxiety we're feeling, we can at least try to intellectualize it to some extent as adults. Imagine being 16 years old and doing it, so yeah.
Exactly, I agree. One of the things that I have my students doing, no matter where they're from, I work with kids all over the country, but I have Memphis kids, I have kids from New York, is making sure that they're applying to an economic safety school and a local school, so that they have options should something change. Obviously, reach for the stars everywhere else, apply. But my Memphis kids are applying to Rhodes, Memphis, and UTK, no matter what, because of that. So I get that.
And the great thing is we have an incredible option here in Memphis with Rhodes College. And that leads me to Allie and your question that I have on here. How has college admissions changed since COVID from the perspective of colleges and universities?
Right. That's a massive question. And Jolie hit on a lot of these things, but our process has really been upended because of COVID and the way we would traditionally work with a group of prospects. And we think about it like a funnel, people who are maybe engaging with us in a small way, their sophomore or junior year. We might have their names from testing agencies. We might have their names because they've reached out to us. And then how we sort of narrow that funnel through the application process and selection. This whole process has been upended for us. Testing, for one example, is not available in big ways for a lot of students. So for that process to be a way that we might get a first interaction with a student is now no longer an option. Last spring when travel was shut down, and we didn't do any traveling. Normally I would travel to certain cities and do college fairs and meet with families and students, and that might be a way that I would get names of students and contact information to engage with later in the process. We didn't get to do that. So a lot of the ways that we that we have built our process on of engaging with families and students, we've had to find new ways to do those things. So we've been incredibly innovative, the way most people have had to be in creating new options for connecting. So virtual options, interviews, reaching out through a website. The good thing is we have new avenues and that we have actually been incredibly adaptive. So that's one way in that things have changed. Another way is that in the way that economy has been impacted, the economy is the financial stability of many institutions has been impacted by this. Endowment funds took a nosedive from the stock markets. Enrollment dropped. Enrollment, as many of you all know, is a way that institutions are able to set funding. So it's based on the number of students for most institutions that come through the door, is how you sort of set your revenue or how you're going to set your level there. And that changed for a lot of institutions because many of them missed their class. They didn't enroll as many as they were looking for. So a lot of uncertainty that has been created in our own model as well. But I don't want to paint a picture that's all sort of gloom and doom, as we're seeing a lot of students connecting with us in new ways to sort of engage and interact. And I think we're finding new ways forward that are beneficial to everybody. And I'm sure we'll get to more of that later. But I guess just to sort of add to the narrative, there's a whole lot of newness and uncertainty happening on our side too.
One thing, and this is a shout out to Rhodes, and I'm not pushing Rhodes in particular, but we were just talking about it before the panel even started, was that one of the things that was really special about Rhodes and other institutions too is they made the decision pretty early on how they're going to work with their students this year. And I think with all the questioning that's going on, that was a real plus, for the security and stability of how the parents and students were feeling, for sure. I was just impressed, and I just want to throw that out there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. But for everybody now, we have a question. What challenges have arisen from where you sit? But also, what opportunities have you seen? And that's for any of the three of y'all to talk about.
Well, I can start. I think one of the biggest, again, the challenges are the uncertainty and trying to predict what's going to happen. And Allie can actually speak to this. Like every student asks me, I'd say half of my students have tests and half of them were unable to test. And now the schools are going test optional, but they're giving you an opportunity, if you have tested, to send that in. And the biggest question is, well, am I going to be considered differently because because I decided to go test optional and there's less data that is backing up my application? Or am I better off sending in a score that maybe I took last year before this all happened and my momentum hadn't been going yet and it wasn't at all indicative of my experience and my talent? Do I send that in as opposed to having nothing at all? So that's been a huge challenge as a counselor and and someone that guides students. So I don't know, Allie, am I allowed to throw it her way?
I would
question?
Be happy to speak to that. And I think, Jolie, that concern is really valid because the way in which institutions are dealing with this is quite different from place to place. Mm-hmm. So I think it's probably not, this is not a scenario where I think you could give a sort of stock answer for anything. We participated in something over the summer hosted by NACAC, which is a member organization that many of us are a part of, to help institutions think about, from a research-based model, how to do evaluation absent of tests. And I will say at Rhodes, actually, we've had quite a bit of practice with this because we've been evaluating applications test blind for students who are at or above our mid-range of a test score. So that means for us, if you turned in a 27 or a 36, I never saw it because that was at or above our mid-range. So we would evaluate these applications blind. So we've actually had a lot of practice doing this. And as we've had to make this pivot into test optional, we feel quite comfortable being able to make evaluation because we're holistic. We have the tools in place to do that. There are institutions that are probably less equipped to do that by the virtue in which they make decisions. And so I'm not faulting them. It's just the tools that they have to make these decisions with. And the test carried much more weight in those situations. So my advice,
I think the larger schools, the massive schools, they're not as holistic in their review as
correct. Yeah.
a school like Rhodes can actually have the personnel and the ability to do that.
Correct. Yeah. You don't have the capacity to, you need a metric like that. So my advice to students who are considering a lot of different schools is to do research into what that testing profile looks like for the student. If your test sits really comfortably within that mid-range, you'll hear this terminology, or you sit above it, you can feel fairly confident that that score only adds and only helps your application. Now, if you're below that, I would not send it, even if they're suggesting or kind of putting pressure on that. I just wouldn't do it. Has been my general advice. But back to your point, Jolie, there are some schools who are even saying that, you don't need to send it in, but they probably are still putting priority on scores for scholarship. And I think that's just where the sort of individual investigation has to happen.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sophie, do you want to speak to any of this?
Sure. Yeah, I can speak a little bit about the way Jewish life has evolved on campus, or virtual campus now that COVID has hit. Since COVID, classes have been virtual and students, most of them moved home. So a lot of our challenges have been the challenges of just any organization trying to stay connected to their constituents and engage their students. So much of the Hillel experience or the Jewish life experience on campus happens from being in person together. So we've been trying to get as creative as possible and innovative as possible over the last 7 months or so to really keep students engaged, make sure that they feel seen and heard in spite of the changing physical landscape of being back at their parents' houses or, being in their childhood rooms. It just feels like a different dynamic for them. So I've found that, and I think this is true probably for most Hillels, that it is challenging to socialize on Zoom or online. And we've utilized Zoom a lot for classes or for programs that have a more formal structure and there's sort of a curriculum to follow. We found that Zoom and online engagement really works well for something a little more educational or professional development oriented. And it's just been really hard to socialize virtually. Although the great thing about college students is they're great at texting and sending voice memos and, using social media. So there are some other technologies that have really been beneficial these last few months. And one of the upsides of technology is that people have been able to stay connected no matter where they are in the country, no matter what time zone they're in. So just one really nice example of that is we do a weekly learning class. It's called the Jewish Learning Fellowship. Hillels all over do it. And last year when we did it in person, we had 2 separate cohorts, one at Rhodes and one at University of Memphis. And because of everything being online now, we've merged those cohorts into one big cohort, and we had almost twice as many people apply and participate. So if we were in person, we would not have one big group of students from across Memphis learning together, and we would probably have fewer students engaging in that Jewish learning. So there have definitely been upsides in the online platform. So that I think there are a lot of opportunities that will continue to emerge as we kind of get used to this routine more and more.
Can I ask a couple of follow-up questions to Jolie and Ali in this whole conversation? You talked about, you have to see what each individual student has as far as how you work with them about the ACT or SAT and all those types of things. What types of criteria do you just in general recommend that the parents or the students consider, when they're thinking those terms? In other words, what kind of additional information could you maybe give our audience tonight about some of the things that you ask the students and parents to reflect on in making that decision?
For the testing question?
Yeah.
So I think, and Ali touched upon it, each school publishes data from the year before. Okay, it's called a common data set. And each school, like if you went into Rhodes College Common Data Set on Google, up would pop all these yearly PDF reports. And they look pretty technical, except if you go to section C, it's admissions data from the year before. And they will tell you the range of scores of accepted students, ACT. They'll do it by section, science, reading, math, English. They'll do it for the SAT. And Allie had touched upon being in the middle 50%. So the middle 50% of a score, say, let's take Tulane University as an example. Their 50% ACT is between a 31 and a 33. That means that 50% of the students that are accepted to Tulane with scores, which they always did use before COVID, are in that range. Is it, so if you're in that range, then Allie is saying, send that score, okay? I have a student right now who has a 29 on her ACT. Stellar everywhere else as well. I've advised her not to use her score. I've advised her to go test optional because she is below the 50% range. And this year they're giving her the option. So when you were speaking even about some opportunities that are coming up right now for students, you have an entire country that's test optional right now, except the public schools in Florida. So basically you have California schools that aren't even letting you send tests if you have them. And everybody's testing policy is really different. So there are real opportunities for the weaker testers, you know, or for the people who really, for whatever reason, couldn't test, which were so many kids. They are saying, and Allie, I don't know if you heard this, that 1/3 of the student applicants this year are applying without test scores. That is huge.
That's massive. Yeah. I hadn't seen that number yet.
Massive. And so colleges have to come up with new ways to evaluate when they're used to using scores as a bar, as a measurement. So I forgot what my original point was, the 50%. So getting the data, and always go to the school's website for the data. Do not go to third-party websites because they are very rarely updated. You know, College Board or all these college search websites, their data is outdated. The best source of data, and I will say it again, is the common data set that a college puts out. And just Google the college with common data set and it will come up. And if you have any problem finding it, email me. And all the data you need about the admissions from the year before is there. They break it down, boys, girls, scores, locality, race, ethnicity, any admissions answer, basic, not like the deep down and dirty data, but the basic data that you need to make those decisions, Bitsy. And I really think if you fall below the 50% range and it's a test optional opportunity, don't send your test.
Well, just go ahead, Allie. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to add to that really quickly, many schools are asking for things in lieu of test. So I would spend some time paying attention to what that is. It might be an additional essay. It might be AP tests. I don't know, but individual schools have decided there are different things in lieu of. So I would spend some time thinking about that and making sure that you're presenting the best picture through those additional pieces.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree.
Just a couple of things real quickly, because we have a couple of questions along this same line. It might be better just to go ahead and look at those now. But just real quickly too, based on what you guys are saying, it's probably important that if students think they're going to fall below that 50%, that they not put any schools down to have their scores sent to them. They should self-report. Is that fair to say?
Okay, so you just picked up on another really interesting piece about college admissions. Okay. Every school has a different policy, whether or not they are accepting self-reported scores meaning you enter them on the application and they accept that as your score report, and you only have to submit an official report if you enroll in that particular college. It saves a ton of money for students not having to send to a lot of schools.
Right.
Then there are also schools that do not accept self-reported scores, and you have to send an official test report if you are using your scores as part of your process. Then there are schools that accept self-reports, but not on the application, but from your guidance counselor. So I beg every student applying to go into the testing policy section of the college, and they will tell you, yes, we take self-reported scores. No, you need to send an official score report. And it gets confusing. One of the big things about college admissions, and like Allie said before, it depends on the school. And it really, there is no uniform mantra that goes out to everybody. Trust me, I wish there was. You know, University of Texas, you have to send a score report. They don't self-report. SMU accepts self-reporting, but not on the application. It has to come from your counselor. University of Maryland, you need to send in an official score report. They will not import that data from your application. So again, it's really important to do that research and know that.
Okay. We have a question here that's applicable, saying my twins sent their ACT scores in early admission, but they retook the ACT in September and October. Can it be resent later if they applied early? And then my daughter did, I assume it's University of Memphis, early admit, and self-report, or University of Michigan.
Okay, so University.
She's on mute. She's on mute. I can't hear her.
The University of Memphis.
Oh, University of Memphis. Okay. Did University of Memphis early admit and self-reported her ACT scores? Does she tell the company to forward the ACT scores?
I think the best thing to do there is just contact the admission office and they'll let you know. We accept additional scores. It depends on where they're at in the review process. But just contact them and they should be able to help you with that.
And does all the advice we're getting tonight apply to private and public schools? Is it the same? Is the advice the same?
I think, generally, yes, I think with those test scores, but I think the key thing too, you want to make sure you do know is that one, the school is actually test optional. Not every school decided to go test optional this year,
Right.
though most did. Make sure that's the case and then really pay attention to how they're handling that.
And I would think an important factor at this time this year, because I advise with my students, if they aren't sure about the answer, to call the admissions office directly and talk with somebody there to get the answer firsthand. I would think that'd be good advice as well. Okay. That took a little bit longer than we had planned, but thank you. Okay. Jolie, we're back to you, my dear, according to our script.
Okay.
What are some alternative options to the standard college experience students could consider?
So, such a hard question. It's not a hard question. I think that in the same way that we apply to a wide range of schools, because we don't know where we might get accepted or where we're going to choose, then we also want to lay out, cast a wide net of options for ourselves. Okay. And we've all been hit with something that really kind of pulled the rug out from under us and everything went a little nutty. So I think that, like I said earlier, applying to an economic safety, should something happen to the income level in a home, and applying to something that is close to home, you have to weigh the decision. Is if the school I want to go to is all online and I can't live there, do I still want to pay out-of-state prices for that or private school prices for that? You know, I have two children that are juniors in college right now. One is in DC and her school's closed, like Rhodes, not closed, but all virtual with no residential living. And she's in an apartment and doing really well. I'm happy to pay that tuition because she's still getting, you know, so much out of it. She happens to be a student that works well online. Not every student does. So knowing that, really kind of being able to decide if maybe you want to do a gap year. Maybe you apply, and I don't mean wait to apply till next year. This year, act as if you are applying to go and begin in fall 2021. But then once you enroll in a university, which you can only enroll in one, you are allowed to ask permission or apply for a gap year and put your education off for a year. If they approve it, they have to approve it. So some schools you have to fight for it, some schools you don't, but a lot of kids go to Israel for a gap year program. A lot of kids do work studies within domestically, obviously, because international travel, who knows? So I think that that is a very viable option that a lot of my students that were going to be freshmen this year, I had about 4 students do gap years, and they are starting next September, which, knock wood, they'll be able to start. So I think a gap year is something that one can think about. I think one can think about staying locally. I think one needs to think about an economic safe school. And then one can dream and hope that everything will probably shift, but hopefully aim towards normalcy as the next school year comes around.
Okay.
Do you have any other suggestions? What would you do?
Same thing, but I was wondering, Allie, did you have very many students who asked to take a gap year at Rhodes this year because of COVID?
We had a lot more inquiry and talk about it than normal. We didn't have as many in-depth following through with it. I guess based on the number of discussions we had about it. Some of that's probably due to the fact that we were intending to be in person initially. So when people had to make their decisions about whether or not to be, with us or not, at that time we were planning to be in person. Though I will say, when we shifted to remote, we allowed the option to open again. Do you want to do a gap year? But at that point, I think students had committed in their head that they were going through with this. We had a handful of students defer through January, so just a half a semester. I will say we will probably continue to have those options open if we're in a really kind of unstable environment again. Lots of schools are creating options for students to defer for half a year, defer for a full year. It is our priority that you have the right experience, that this is a good fit, that's better for everybody. So most schools, I think, are approaching it like that.
Okay, good, okay. This is for Allie and Jolie. What steps can students proactively take to position themselves well when it comes time to apply for college?
I think I would really stress taking advantage of all the virtual opportunities out there. I think that, up until now, there was always the college visit vacation or the weekend to go visit a school so that you could get a real guttural feel for how it feels to be on that campus. And kids don't have that. And right now they don't have that. So the schools have done such a wonderful job with virtual tours, virtual information sessions, virtual conversations, like you would, Allie, go to a high school and visit to give your pitch, and for Rhodes, and now they're doing those virtually. And I would say definitely participate in those. There are Facebook groups of students, there are Facebook groups of parents. I would and no, it's not the same as putting your feet on the campus and feeling it. If any of you have walked Rhodes, you know that looking at it in pictures is not like what it actually feels like when you're in the middle of that campus. But we can only do the best that we can do. And I really would stress that a student take advantage of all the virtual opportunities. They have the time right now. They're home. Obviously, they're entrenched in school as well, but I would definitely take advantage of that for sure, because I really do think that that could give you somewhat of much more of a feeling than any book or website can. So I think that we should take advantage of all the virtual opportunities that Allie said that they work so hard to put together for the kids. You know, there's a reason. They know how important it is to connect.
I would echo a lot of that. The basic principle of still finding opportunities to connect to the college, connect to the community, and see if it's actually a good match, a good fit. That principle is still at play. Now, the way in which you have to go about it is very different, but you know, these virtual visits actually I think are quite useful. We have a lot of things in place for students to connect with students to connect with faculty. So take advantage of this huge library now that exists out there. Other things too, social media accounts, YouTube channels, things that you can, that your students can take advantage of. The other thing I would suggest is now that we're sort of sitting in a new reality, a new way in which we're engaging with the world, encourage your student to think about ways of taking their interest in their activities and making them applicable here. If they loved service and they've not been able to volunteer in, you know, I don't know, in a school and tutoring with a kid, you can't do that. Maybe helping out at the food pantry and in a different way. So if volunteering is still a passion, finding a new way to do that. If sports are still a passion, finding a new way to do that. And then make that evident in your college application. So that would be my other advice, you know, find new ways forward and make that evident in the application.
A couple of things that I've observed. Go ahead, Jolie, I'm sorry.
No, it's a really, really good point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
A couple of things that I've observed too.
I'm in the process of trying to put together a database that for virtual volunteer opportunities. You know, so that, you know, I have students that are Zooming with younger disabled students. I have students that are tutoring. I have students that are doing small basketball groups with 2 to 3 kids with masks. And so I really like that, Allie.
Yeah, we have some of our students are doing like virtual game times with lower school, with elementary school kids. We have one student who actually developed a podcast in the midst of all the social injustice. And she's got people listening to it, you know, and she's worked hard putting it together.
That's great.
Something else too that I think is important is that with the opportunity to visit schools virtually, we've actually had some students who might not have even considered some schools, so they're now actively looking at, because they had these Zoom or whatever types of virtual opportunities, and they've gotten really excited about some schools. For example, I was talking with a young lady today who's applying to Colgate, and she might not have known where Colgate was, but when she looked up what their mission was and just everything about it, she got very excited about it because it kind of fits in with what she's looking for. So there are some benefits to it that way, you know, but yeah, the extracurriculars and all those things are really hard. They really are, to try to make it work, you know. One thing that we try to do too, and we do it every year, we're doing it even more this year, is that if we have a student who's interested in a school, and if we have a student who's currently there, or a student who's a recent graduate from there, we will get them in touch with those students. And so your students may talk with their high school counselors and see if they know of anybody, or you may ask some of your friends if they know of anybody who may have gone to those schools. And that way they can at least give them a sense of what the school was like, you know, for them, you know, either currently or in the recent past. And that's always been a good gauge. And also a lot of times we found that the students were more likely to ask better questions of people who are close to their peers than they are to adults, you know, and that the college students to whom they're speaking are going to be more open about their advice and their perceptions and things too because of that. Yeah. Okay. Sophie, since you've been so patient with us, what resources are available for students who want to learn more about Jewish life on college campuses that they're considering?
Sure, great question. So something that actually you brought up and made me think of is that Hillels can also be a resource for students interested in meeting other students that are doing a major that they want to consider, or if it's a way for students to get firsthand information from their peers about schools that they're considering. So I think looking into Hillels at the schools that you're considering is a really great way to get a sense of Jewish life on campus and just secular life on campus. Hillels are a pluralistic organization, so we celebrate and encourage and accommodate all expressions of Jewish observance and identity. So Hillels also tend to be very tapped into what Jewish life looks like in the city that they're based as well. We're obviously blessed here to be so well connected to the Memphis Jewish community. And I know a lot of our current students feel that connection very strongly. So for those that are considering Jewish life on campus, really Hillel's a great resource to look into. And I can also drop some links in the chat box, but Hillel International manages a whole database of information about Jewish life on different college campuses. It's like a mini Google. You can search the schools that you're considering and learn about their Jewish student populations, if they offer kosher dining on campus, what Jewish Greek life organizations exist on campus. So Hillel International does provide that incredible resource. They also publish, they call it the Hillel College Guide. It's a magazine version of some of that information. So I highly recommend signing up to get that. I believe they'll send it to you for free in the mail. So that's coming out. Their newest version is coming out this month, actually. And the other resource that's amazing through Hillel International is a database of scholarships that are available for Jewish students. So one example, we have an amazing partnership with Rhodes, and we manage this Jewish Community Fellowship, which is built to attract and support Jewish life on campus. And the fellows that get accepted into this program experience professional development opportunities throughout the year with their peers, and they're awarded a $10,000 scholarship each year that they're in school. So that is one of the scholarships that's available to find out about through this Hillel International scholarship database. So I'll post some links in the chat box and also send some links via email after this call, just so you have those resources as well.
Okay, good. We have one question in our chat box we haven't looked at, and then we'll open it up to questions in general. But one that is in here that either Jolie or Allie can both speak to is, should current juniors in high school start to prep for the SAT or the ACT, or will next year's admissions most likely be test optional as well?
I will just say, I think it's hard to read the tea leaves here a little bit because we don't know how schools will respond to this. I personally believe this is a watershed moment for the ACT and the SAT. I don't think it will come back with the sort of prevalence that it has held in the past, but I could be wrong. So I don't know. I do imagine that there'll be plenty of schools that go back to using it, quite heavily. And so I would hate to suggest that you pretend as if it wouldn't exist. So I can say for Rhodes personally, we are going to move to test optional indefinitely. So we won't be using tests in the future. And some schools may be citing that prediction. For data modeling, it's important that they actually do something for 3 years. So many schools out there may just go test optional for the next 3 years. But again, I would just look at the websites individually and what they're saying.
Yeah, some schools have announced plans, like Allie was saying, for the next 3 years. The University of Wisconsin just did that. I do think that certain schools are only going to, they're saying they're just doing it for this application cycle. So certainly, and then there's a whole list of schools that are test optional that were that way before COVID.
Right.
You can go, if you wanted to post this link, Sophie, you could put in the fairtest.org. And that is every school and their test optional status. And if they have said that they're going to be doing it for 3 years, if they're just doing it for this year, or if they're that way now completely. And that's a really good resource for that. But I do still think you need to prep for the test and take it, because say you find a program at a school that decides next year they're not test optional, and it's a school that's a perfect fit otherwise. I think it's a little soon to forfeit taking it just yet.
The other thing I will add to this is that if you have students who are considering something like med school and will have to take the MCAT, or law school and have to take the LSAT, doing something like this is actually incredible practice. It's useful practice. It's not all for naught. So there's that too to consider.
I would say for our students as well, we are still continuing. One of the many things we offer our students is ACT prep, and we are still continuing that through the year. We'll be doing an actual mock ACT for them to get an idea as far as their base score, and then work with them on individual areas from there. But we're definitely not taking that out of our equation as far as things that we're helping our students with, because if nothing else, again, like we said earlier, if some student does extremely well, has a 35 or 36, you know, if schools do like they're doing this year, where you can, you know, submit it if you want to, why wouldn't you? You know, it's just going to help your application, and you know, so there's no downside to doing it. And I think that's a great point about the LSATs and the MCATs and everything else like that. That's a fabulous point. It really is. Yeah. So we can open it up to if the ladies in the panel don't have anything further, we can open it up to, if y'all don't have any specific points you want to make before we do the closing, we can open it up to general questions if anybody has any questions of the group.
I have a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you Stacy?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So for the test optional schools, how do they determine who would get, if you qualify for scholarship, if you don't turn in your ACT or SAT scores?
So again, my suggestion with that is it's really going to be school specific. So I can speak to Rhodes. We spent a lot of time in focus groups and research. I led a team this summer of finding ways to decouple our reading process from the test score. So we've worked out ways to make sure that the evaluation process for not only admission, but scholarship is fair and equitable without a test. So we can feel confident saying that your student could apply to Rhodes without a test and still be eligible for the highest scholarships. Were you just using other metrics? That's probably not the case at all schools. So I would be really careful about seeing how they're handling it. And if they are asking that you need a test to be eligible for merit scholarship, then you probably want to send in a test.
Okay, thank you.
I also think, Stacy, that a lot of schools are coming out and are announcing whether or not you do need scores to be eligible for the merit-based scholarships that they offer. Some of them are substituting it with an extra application, which will be additional essays, maybe an additional recommendation, interviews for scholarships. There are actual scholarship interviews now. So they are trying to come up with, if they have forfeited using scores as an indicator, because some schools have, then they are trying to put into place other metrics that will help. Some of them are asking for a graded paper, a graded research paper that has comments on them. So they're coming up with other ways to evaluate, to really accommodate those kids that suffered from not being able to test, not just the ones that maybe didn't test as well as they wanted to. They didn't get the momentum. I mean, all studies show that if you take consecutive tests, you do better. And a lot of kids were only able to take one test and lost that momentum through March through October. So they are doing additional interviews, additional essays, additional applications, and trying to get a more firm picture of a student's eligibility for that scholarship through those means.
Okay. Thank you.
That's why I think calling the admissions office and staying, you know, in developing a relationship with them can be so critical. I really do. What I tell our students is that if you get, and Allie, you may not like this, but this is what I tell our students, that if you have any questions, to call the admissions office directly. And at the end of the conversation, say, if I have any other questions, may I call you back? They'll probably tell you the name of the representative for their geographical area. But that does a couple of things. Number one, the students are getting the information directly from the source. And so they're getting the information without going through a third party. They're also, maybe it will prompt some other questions from the student during that conversation. And number three, you're developing a relationship with that school. And, you know, again, so if you have a specific question, you have somebody you can call back, because we have had some students who have called different schools, not Rhodes, I promise, but where they've left a message and they haven't gotten a call back. A week later, they still haven't gotten a call back, you know. But if you can do something where you have an actual person to ask for, it's not going to guarantee it, but it's certainly going to help your chances, you know, of getting the information that you need.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me? Okay. yeah, I'm the lady with the twins who are applying to 22 schools, and I've had to learn everything about college applications in the past 2 weeks. And I think I've aged 10 years a minute. But in any case,
You look good if you have. You look great.
it's a bit overwhelming, and they're kind of doing it on their own, which is scary. But they seem to have come up with, as you said, 10 and 12 colleges of interest. And we did the early admission for those that we suddenly found out they had to do, and wrote a resume in 2 hours and did the whole thing. Sadly, it was, but we survived. And one of the things I wanted to ask about is, and I work full time, when you put in so I've never had to go and do this before. When you put in a college application, and I only have this experience with these early admissions, are you automatically put in some pool for scholarships? Because I mean, I don't know how to go about, and I work full time, and they don't know, just finding scholarships, because they have these websites and we haven't done that. But is it an automated process where the school automatically puts you in a process for scholarships? And then I didn't know if it's based on merit, and I guess it has nothing to do with financial aid. And I did manage the FAFSA, and I have one particular question at the end if someone could tell me what to do. I was shocked that 7 out of 12 schools my son listed are CSS schools. So I, parent, got a notice that I have to do this, and I went online and was completely intimidated. So the thing is about the scholarships, and is it an automated process, and do they merit, or what kinds of scholarships? And then the CSS, maybe if I did need assistance, if someone in the community knows about it, it looked a little intimidating.
Okay, I think I can start with that by telling you I have twins and I survived. And they're both juniors in college right now, so I get it. Yeah, so it is daunting. You deserve a glass of wine for sure. So again, the answer is going to be, it depends on the school. And I know it's such a frustrating answer to get, but I will tell you this, there are schools that will automatically consider you for merit-based aid. Sometimes there are deadlines, like University of Maryland, take for example, you have to apply for the priority November 1st deadline to be considered for any and all scholarships, but they automatically consider you for those. University of Southern California, their due date's not until January 15th, but if you apply by December 1st, you get automatically considered for all of their scholarships. Tulane University, automatically considered for merit-based scholarships. And then on top of that, there are several applications you can do for specific scholarships on top of that, merit-based. Washington University has a whole book of scholarships that are very pointed, for creative writers, for STEM, for are you on the school newspaper? And you can apply for several scholarships that way. So again, to answer your question, a lot of schools automatically review you for merit-based money, if it's a school that's got the money to give and likes to give it. And then on top of that, there are separate scholarships that you can actually apply to. The most money comes from school scholarships, the college's own scholarships. There are so many other scholarships out there that some, like what Sophie was just talking about, which is an amazing scholarship. You just have to be quite discerning about the ones that you apply to, because not all of them are on the up and up. But the most reliable and the most money comes from the actual college itself. So that's the first thing you would do, is go to a college's website, go to their financial aid tab, and there will be scholarship information. There's also a wonderful website called capex.com, CAPPEX, that you can search a college, and that college's, all of their merit-based scholarships generate for you to look at. are generated for you to look at. So you can go into your 22 schools and type in which one of them on CAPEX and click Merit Aid, and they will list the different scholarships they offer.
And by merit, do you mean that is it just the child has great academics, or I have one of my children is an artist because of his talents, or is it, when you say merit, it's not much, that's not financial aid, it's based on like what kind of, what are they based on? I just don't even know what merit means.
Well, okay, so there's two types of aid, merit aid and need-based aid, okay? Need-based is a financial gift. Right, Allie? It's a financial.
Yeah, need-based is based on the family's financial ability to contribute.
Yeah,
Right.
like how much your family can contribute yearly. Merit-based covers anything academic, and art is academic, but it doesn't, if they're applying to an art program, then that specific program might have a scholarship for them. If they're applying to theater, then maybe the theater program has a specific scholarship that might work for them. Sometimes scholarships are given per major by the department. Sometimes they're given by all of admissions. Again, that's why it's so hard to give you a blanket answer. But if each school will list the actual scholarships in that database that I told you, as well as on their individual websites. Does Rhodes College automatically consider you for merit-based scholarships?
We do, yeah. Just to give you an example, all applicants to Rhodes are automatically considered for merit aid, regardless of deadline. So we don't have a priority deadline. If you apply at early action, you're considered. If you apply at regular decision, you're considered. And then in addition to that, we offer a few special scholarships that do require something that you need to submit. For example, the Jewish Community Fellowship that Sophie described earlier, that's a $10,000 scholarship that we award to 5 students selected by JCP. We have one for students interested in fine arts. Actually, it's not one, we award many. We have one for students interested in service and leadership. So that's just one example to show you that schools will have merit aid and then often will have these sort of additional special things.
Yeah, and about the CSS, I'm just curious, is it intimidating or is there assistance in Memphis? I kind of have to figure this out in the week, and I don't know if anyone is, if other parents in the community, if I spoke to some parents at time and some of them never heard of it, whereas FAFSA, everyone seemed to know about it. So
very often the CSS profile is asked by the specific school as well. It's a supplement to the FAFSA.
And especially private liberal arts schools, isn't it? Predominantly private schools.
We're a CSS school.
Right.
So we ask for the CSS. It should have an option like the FAFSA where you can automate tax return in there, I think.
okay.
That should help. If you own, I will say if you own your own business, it will be more challenging. Or if you have any sort of extreme circumstances at play, it might be a little bit more challenging. But I'm happy to see if I can help later. If you need it.
It's my weekend project. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. Well, I would like to invite each of our panelists to lead the group with some final words of wisdom about the college admissions process.
I would say breathe. I would say breathe. And it can be fun. And if you look at it as really going one step at a time, in your junior year, now you're in senior year, and going one step at a time and tackling each task because they do build upon each other, and reach out for support. I mean, really reach out for it. And I mean, just even like there are so many websites just like mine that have, I mean, I post a blog post every week of the moment topics, guides, checklists, all at your fingertips. And I am not the only one that does it. And I'm happy to send a list of all the different resources out there that can, from fairtest.org to other counselors that do exactly what I do, to my own website at pondercollege.com, to NACAC, everything. So there's resources out there, and there are people that are very passionate in this business to help students get equal access to that information. And that's the most important thing. And gearing up and getting the knowledge so that you can go through this process and hopefully have a little bit of fun at the same time.
I would say to not lose sight of the goal here, and that should be a place that is the place where your student can grow into the person that they want to become. And I will tell you, there are lots and lots of places in this country where they can do that. And it is not one magic match. There are so many places. So to not lose sight of the fact that really it's just about finding a good match and not worrying about it after you do find that.
My advice would be to use the Jewish community wherever you are looking to apply to school as a resource for learning what happens Jewishly and beyond in each individual place that you're considering to apply. The Jewish community can be one of those resources.
Well, just like we are tonight, the three of us that are on the panel that Sophie invited us to be on. So it was a lot of fun to do it. It really was. Sophie, just one thing, if you would like, you're very welcome to share my email address with the people who are on the panel. I'm not saying I can do any good, but if you have any questions, I have a lot of resources, and now I have some other ones with Allie. I already have Jolie, but we do have a lot of resources that we can call on for for any kind of advice, because it can be daunting. It very definitely can be daunting and scary, even without COVID involved. It's a scary process, and you only want the best for your children, and that's how you should be. You're good Jewish mothers and whatever. But anyway, and I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. And if there are no other questions, I'm going to say good night and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Moderating. Great job.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great to see you, Jolie.
You too, Bitsy. I'll speak to you soon.
Huh?
I'll speak to you soon. I need
I
my.
hope so. I hope so.
Reach Memphis.
Excellent. Bye,
All
guys.
right, Sophie, thank you so much for having me.
It was
Allie,
great
it was fun
fun.
meeting you.
You too.